Welcome everybody to the second episode of the Three Amigos. With me today, I have JP, Revel, and Andrei. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Very good. Very good. Excited for the follow-up.
Awesome. Yeah, very good. Thanks. Yeah, super excited to be here today.
Before we get started, I know that I will need some lubrication today, so let's open a couple of beers. Andrei, what did you bring to fuel the conversation?
I have a mixed bag here today because I'm sitting across from a pretty diverse beer fridge. But I'm going to kick things off with something that I recently rediscovered. It's a personal favorite of mine. It's a little flavor of Germany, and it's something that I think even a snob like you, Jasper, might appreciate. It does have a little bit of a Belgian flavor to it, but being from Germany, it has its own kind of unique taste. I really do love something in the water. I really do love German beers, and I think this is a good compromise between the two. So if you haven't tried it yet, it's quite nice. I will butcher the pronunciation, but Avengers Bison Doppelbock, I guess, is how you would pronounce it.
There you go. And JP, what did you bring to this conversation?
Well, I thought it would be very appropriate to bring a bottle of the Three Amigos. So this is my homebrew.
Now you're just rubbing it in.
Nice.
So this is a red ale, bottled early December. So typical red ale. You've tried it. I find that it gets with time gets thicker, bitter, but thought it would be appropriate to have Three Amigos today.
Awesome, and yeah, for those that are new to the podcast, JP is an avid home brewer. He's been making several batches throughout the Corona pandemic. Andrei has been, coming from the marketing world, has been great in creating labels and come up with wonderful names for JP's beers. I'm actually joining the fun here, that JP, because I'm also gonna open up a homebrew. This is a
exciting
an almond OD saison style beer, named after the band Visigoth. Their last album, Conqueror's Oath. So given that this is a very oaty beer, I called it the Conqueror's Oats. I got a reaction video of trying this beer for the first time on my YouTube channel, so check that out if you're interested. This is bottle 3 of 6, I believe, that I only make. I only make small batches. I only have the capacity to make 1 gallon at a time. So yeah, I'm gonna pop this open. There we go. All right, guys, I'm gonna pour this out.
It's a nice pop sound.
That is a beautiful sound.
Yeah, cheers.
There you go. Cheers, everybody. Let's get ready for our conversation. So today, what we're talking about is we're gonna talk about comeback bands that were around before the year 2000, had some success. Somewhat or fully went away. It's open for the interpretation of the Three Amigos, but then definitely came back after the year 2000. And we want to focus on albums. So we're going to look at what do we think are the best, but also the worst comeback albums. And so let's start on a high note. Andrei, you're unmuted right now, I see. So why don't you kick us off with and I know that there's going to be a lot of runners up here for all three of us, but if you would have to call out one really strong comeback album, and I just want to specify, when we were talking about this before, we made the agreement that we're not going to limit ourselves to that one comeback album. So we could be talking about an album that we like a lot of a band that came back 2-3 albums before. So it doesn't have to be the actual comeback album, but definitely a band that has been around for some time, so we can see the difference before and after. All right, Andrei, what's your thought?
All right, so there's a reason that we came up with a number of options. So let's just get this one out of the way, because I think this one's on all of our lists. Maybe not at the very top, but definitely somewhere in the middle, and that's Brave New World. Brave New World is a phenomenal album.
100%.
One of the first albums, I think actually that was my second exposure to Iron Maiden, which is my favorite band of all time. The first being X Factor, and just the level of not just technical prowess, but vocal improvement, lyrical improvement, production, and everything that at the time when albums were a little bit harder to come by, hearing Brave New World just completely blew my mind. At the time, not as much information happening, so I wasn't aware of kind of the symbolism behind Bruce's return and everything. Like, it was just experiencing a sound for the first time that just completely blew my mind. Songwriting, just everything. And due disclaimer, I did enjoy X Factor quite a bit. It was perfect for me, especially lyrically at the time. But Brave New World was just an incredible thing. And then later, as I got more into Maiden, I took the time to research the band's history and the story, and just realized how important that album was to the not so new wave of British heavy metal, just metal in general, and how it really spawned a resurgence in the band. Because from Jasper, you probably know this a little bit better than I do, but in the 90s, I guess their popularity was really waning. They were back to playing clubs. They were just not there. And then when I went to my first Maiden show in 2003 at a relatively large arena, one of the largest arenas in Toronto, it was just a completely different experience. And I think it's a really huge thing, not only for the band, but for the genre in general.
JP, I think you want to add some comments there.
Yeah, I said fully agree. As you said, we're about the same age. We all have the same experience in terms of introduction to metal, and I think Brave New World, followed by the Rock in Rio live album, was obviously a huge, revelation for me in terms of the world of metal. Discovering Iron Maiden. I started a few years before that with the Life After Death, but the second exposure was Brave New World. And I fully agree. I think this was the elephant in the room, if I may say. We all had that one.
100%. So let's stay with this album for a little bit, because it's, if you can go back to it now, and because obviously there is a nostalgic value here for all three of us. Like, this is one of the first truly great Maiden albums that we listened to, but also one of the that we were part of that discovery. Like, it was launched when we were already a metalhead. Like, you could say that the Number of the Beast and Power Slave and a bunch of other albums in the 80s are bigger classics than Brave New World, but they were released either before we were born, or we were already born, but we were not aware of Iron Maiden at such a young age. This is an album that this was for me the first Iron Maiden album after I fell in love with the band, that I went through a launch cycle with that, and that was super exciting. I remember seeing the Wicker Man video for the very first time on like the heavy metal show on Belgian MTV, and that was like at 1 o'clock at night. Like, that was the only time that they would play heavy metal. And that song is also, by the way, so phenomenal. I even would say that, and again, I understand there's a nostalgia that plays here, but not only do I think it is the best actual comeback album of the 2000s, because this is the first album that the band played. I think this is top 5 comebacks in heavy metal history, if you then include the Back in Black from Acdc, Heaven and Hell from Black Sabbath, a couple of things like that. It's definitely up there. There's 10 songs. 9 songs I think are really great. There's one that I think is a little bit of a stinker, which is The Mercenary. But
I agree with you here.
Wicker,
I fully agreed. Yeah.
And what I think is amazing is that this was obviously also the first time that Iron Maiden shows a little bit more of a proggy approach, which is something that they kind of squeeze that bottle a little bit, maybe too much on following albums. But with Blood Brothers, that was a really, really well-written song. And my favorite song of that album is still the quirky, the thin line between love and hate. Closer of the album.
It's a great
like
song.
A stompiness. It's slower. But all of these songs are really great, and that's also why, JP, you're absolutely right to call out Rock in Rio, the live album that followed it. That album also, don't forget, started with 3 songs from Brave New World. And
the Ghost of the Navigator on that record is
oh my god,
even like Blood Brothers, like you name it, but all the new songs in the Rock in Rio are just incredible.
Yeah, it's a great album.
And I just want to point out that I mean, I know we're talking about Brave New World, but Rock in Rio would never have happened without Brave New World. And one of the amazing things that just blew my mind on Rock in Rio was hearing the complete transformation of the flawless execution of Sign of the Cross, but complete transformation of the Klansman.
Absolutely.
The reinvigoration of Fear of the Dark, which and I know there's a bit of a toss-up between JP and I here, but I agree that the studio version and throughout the 90s, that song didn't really do that much. Even on, Live in Donington, we Like Dead One, but just hearing that at Rock in Rio just brought new life to that track.
100%.
And now it's become staple.
100%. Like, if I want to show Iron Maiden for the first time to somebody, Fear of the Dark at Rock in Rio is probably the video that I'll do.
It's funny, I'd show The Wicker Man, because I think the intro when Adrian's goes behind the curtain and goes on stage.
So awesome. Also, I know we're veering off topic here, and we might do an episode on this.
We might just talk about Iron Maiden for the next hour.
probably. But
I'm out, man.
What is also really cool about Brave New World, and then we'll take it back to comeback albums, is I love that opening music, the intro, the classical intro. Now, it's not classical, it's movie soundtrack. It's actually a thing called Our First Throne, from the movie First Night, which is a terrible Arthur and Lancelot Guinevere movie with Sean Connery as King Arthur and Richard Gere as Lancelot. As a kid, I saw that in like the early 90s. My mom took me for a birthday or something like that. And as a kid, I just loved this movie so much. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check it out. It's like this so 90s movie, like a very polished Arthur movie, love triangle. And there's this one scene where the good army charges in the night and they're all like shiny armors. And then like at the right moment, they all draw their swords. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Anyway,
just to finish on this, I'll be very short. I've been reading Adrian Smith autobiography for the last couple of weeks. And it's funny, just last night he talked about Brave New World for the first time. It's a book, it's mostly about fishing. Let's say 1 page out of 10 is about Iron Maiden, 9 pages out of 10 are about fishing, which I'm okay with because I grew up fishing a lot, so that's fine, it's good balance. But he talks, like last night I read a few pages about Brave New World, and he said it was the first few days were extremely tense in the studio because it was the comeback of Bruce, was the comeback of Adrian. The first time they had 3 guitar players, so everybody was trying to find a spot between Dave being like, I've been around forever, Yannick being like, I fill in your spot for the last 10 years, and Adrian trying to be like, hey, I'm just coming back, this is my original solo. And a new producer, it was Kevin Shirley's first Iron Maiden album. So anyway, it was very interesting to read like the first, until they recorded The Wicker Man, which was the first song they recorded. They said it was like kind of a dogfight in the studio for the first few days, and very interesting to read about the dynamic, how they had a hard time, and then Wicker Man, they recorded it, it sounded fantastic, and then they moved on, and we know what they've become in the last 22 years.
Yeah. JP, let's get one of your picks for, let's just go straight to what you despise. I just want to preface something. There are so many releases every year, and there are a ton of great albums every year, and there's a shit ton of bad albums out there. And I'm sure that there are a lot of really, really bad comeback albums that just are so bad that they don't really make an impression, that they fly under the radar. I have a feeling that we are going to stick to maybe more known bands or albums, because that's the spotlight, right? Like, more people will know about it. I'm sure that today albums came out of bands that had a history, and we will never hear those albums, or maybe one day, and it's like, okay, it's not really good. I'd be surprised. Like, I don't want to play the super hipster card for this conversation, is my point. But anyway, JP.
That's a very good point, actually. I actually didn't think of that initially, but you're right. I think a lot of the bands on our collective lists are going to be ones that are bigger bands, and that's mostly because of the hype surrounding the comeback album.
100%.
And if it slays, it slays. But if it's a disappointment, oh my God, is it just the biggest letdown in your life?
Exactly, and they might still be better albums than a lot of crap that gets released, but it's just because it doesn't live up to
expectations. It's just wow.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, all that being said, JP, what would be one of your picks?
I want to hear this.
For me, it'd be Metallica, Death Magnetic.
Oh,
when it came out, boy, those albums were not great, but when Death Magnetic came out, a lot of people I knew at the time told me it's fantastic, sounds so good.
You're not friends with those people anymore, right?
No. This is 1986 all over again. So, I was planning to listen to the album, but yeah, I heard a lot about it before I listened to the album, listened to it. And yeah, for me, it was a big disappointment. I'd say the day that never ends. The day that never comes. But that never ends because the song is so long, probably.
It's because it's the song that never ends.
And people told me, oh my God, the song is phenomenal. Listen to it. For me, it was like, it's like Fade to Black wannabe, or wannabe Fade to Black. Didn't like the album. Love Metallica in the 80s. Was not a big fan of the albums from 95 to 2005. So I thought Death Magnetic was supposed to be the album of the comeback. And for me, it was a disappointment. Don't really like the songs, and the Unforgiven number 3, like, come on, how many Unforgiven do you need? 1, 2, 3.
Just forgive him already.
Anyway, I think I've said enough, but sure. Yeah, that's my pick.
All right,
I haven't given Unforgiven 3 yet.
So I'm gonna say that I 100% disagree with you on that one. To the point that
it's fine.
Like this is not it's not one of my top 3 picks for best comeback album, but it's in my runners up list. Because
really,
for me,
we gotta compare runners up.
No, for sure we will. But maybe it's not a Master of Puppets, and I know that the production of that album has been a source of debate, let's say, and I think that after the very weird production on Saint Anger, people needed something radically different, and I think that they got that to some extent with Death Magnetic. I actually like a lot of songs in Death Magnetic. I think that Day That Never Comes is a pretty solid song. Sure, people were saying it's the new one, it's the new Fade to Black. No, it's not. I do believe that My Apocalypse is a phenomenal song. I think the Judas Kiss is pretty cool. I think that All Nightmare Long is a really good song. They did, for the first time, re-embrace their past again. It was more of a thrash album, and all of a sudden on those tours, if you remember, I'm sure that we've seen them play at those times more than once. All of a sudden, they're playing Kill 'Em All songs. They're playing Ride the Lightning songs you never heard before. They're playing the Four Horsemen every night, and I feel like it was like the album that it's the album that Saint Anger could have been, if they had released Death Magnetic at the time of Saint Anger, then Metallica would have been one of the bands that had kickstarted this whole revival of thrash. And I feel maybe that the revival of thrash had to happen for them to make Death Magnetic. But it was rough around the edges. I mean, I think Rick Rubin, his production is something that, people will debate about it. But what I do like about that is that unlike Metallica before and after, this is the one time in the last 30 years that Metallica has been somewhat able to self-edit. Because one of my big pet peeves with Hardwired, which I think, across 2 discs on Hardwired, there is a lot of material that could make a phenomenal 1-disc album. But it's like, it feels like any idea they had, they kind of made a song out of it. And I'll come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
That's my thought on that, but I appreciate where you're coming from. Andrei, I think you're dying to say something.
You're making a lot of really good points.
I do that time to time.
Very rarely, but it's very interesting that you say that. I agree with most of them. I love your point about if Death Magnetic was released in 2003, it definitely would have been a completely different experience. But the one thing I disagree with you there is the self-editing. I found that my biggest issue with Death Magnetic, aside from the production, which after a couple of listens you kind of get into, is it just seems that all the songs just drag on and on unnecessarily.
Sure.
It's that whole idea of let's take the Master of Puppets formula and just reuse it. But the problem is Master of Puppets was fresh, the ideas were good, the riffs were innovative, but it seems like a song like the Judas Kiss, which has this really catchy kind of chorus, it has a really nice kind of bridge, everything's there, but the repetition and the excessive riffing, something that has 4 repetitions, they make it into 8, and it feels like the album really bloats, and they're trying to do something that they did in the 80s, and they're doing that progressive approach, but like it's just not there. Again, that's just my opinion. I know a lot of people that love that album, but I do have a question for you. Since you seem to be a big Death Magnetic fan, where does it rank among your post 80s Metallica?
I mean, that's a tough one. Like I said, I really like half of Hardwired. Right, I made a video the other day about the best albums of the year Hardwired came out, and I put Hardwired as my #1 album. Also because it is Metallica, and you know, with everybody, yeah, and that's fair. But you know, Metallica is kind of like a Microsoft, right? It's such a big institution. It does so many things, and it's so impactful to the world of metal. But the slightest thing that people don't agree with are enlarged, are scrutinized, and are attacked. And it's almost an impossible feature for any iconic band. And let's be honest, Metallica is the biggest band in the world. There's nothing, like, not even in metal. Like, Foo Fighters are coming close maybe, but Metallica is a different world. For a band like that, it's impossible to get a fair assessment of what they've done because everybody's emotions are there. People already hate it or love it before something comes out, and that's tough. But I do like Hardwired. I like a lot about Death Magnetic. The Black Album was a shock, but it's a phenomenal album. Let's not kid ourselves. It's just, you know, I love thrash metal. So the Black Album will never be my favorite album of Metallica. Yeah, it's tough. I can't. I'm gonna say it's in my. I think Death Magnetic is gonna be in my top 3 of the post and Justice for All. One thing we talked about live albums following, or you know, Rock in Rio following Brave New World. I have a lot of bootlegs of Metallica live albums. Some of them sold by Metallica because they basically can buy any show that Metallica ever played these days. And I have this like a Death Magnetic show that they played in Berlin in the O2 Arena there. That is my favorite Metallica live album of all time. It's just phenomenal. Like the set list that they have the best songs of Death Magnetic, and then just all these classics. You got great crowd. It was like I think it was like the release party or something like that, but then with 60,000 people. Anyway,
just to. You know, based on what you said, you said Metallica, people have a hard time to assess what the band does. I fully agree with you. To your point, though, I'd say that if it was not Metallica on Hardwired or Death Magnetic, I don't know if people would have actually listened to the album, but I can be wrong. However, I would say if Death Magnetic had come out in 95, or 2000 or 98, maybe my opinion, I have to admit, maybe my opinion of the album would have been different. I would have been like, wow, that's a kick-ass album. Yeah. And they started the revival of thrash metal, and maybe we'll come back to that because that's one of my picks, but I always have said like Creator was so good in the early 2000s that just hearing from like, oh, Metallica is back to thrash, and you listen to Death Magnetic when their Creator just released Enemy of God, you're like, yeah, I can't
Yeah, that's
So maybe I was just influenced and biased.
I'm just gonna follow with a pick for one of the best comeback albums based on what you just said, JP. Like, just get straight to it.
Sorry, I know I ruined it.
no, not at all. Like, Creator. I'm actually wearing a Creator shirt right now. Probably one of the best bands in thrash today, and it's always tough to compare with the classic ages when a band really redefines something. But I'm gonna say that Creator today is a million times better as a band than they were ever before 1999. My pick for best band of a best album of a band that made a comeback is I'm not picking Enemy of God though. I am picking Gods of Violence. I think Enemy of God is a phenomenal album. For me, Enemy of God is on par with the Violent Revolution.
Yeah, 2001. Yeah,
exactly.
Revolution. Their comeback album. Yeah,
with Reconquering the Throne and stuff like that. That's like that's the proper comeback. Or that was the comeback album. Enemy of God was the actual comeback because that was much, a much bigger hit at right time. Also, 2005. But for me, 2017, Gods of Violence, best Creator album of all time. I know Phantom Antichrist is up there as well. For me, of all time. It's one of those anomalies where a band, they've been around now for 40 years, and their last album is their best album, in my point. Now, they are writing a new album, or they're working on a new album, so we'll see what happens. But that album was just phenomenal. I'm sure that, JP, Andrei, you might think that a different album in the comeback era of the band is their best. But if we don't talk about Creator, then what the hell are we talking about?
I agree. I think all of their albums in the last 19 years have been really good, except Heart of Chaos. I think Hearts of Chaos.
That opening song is so good. Oh, that's such a good song.
I was going to say the title track is epic. However, the album is kind of blah, but I think Violent Revolution was a great album. That's what introduced me to Creator.
Oh, really?
Going back to the live album, Live Creation. That's how I discovered Creator through Violent Revolution. And then, Phantom, Antichrist, Gods of Violence, amazing, Enemy of God. We've talked about it before, but I think it's just like red wine. It gets better with age. Songwriting. I don't know if you read, there's a book written about the comeback of Creator that's called Violent Evolution, which I've read. It's pretty cool, and the opening page is like back in 1999, 2000, Melee comes back from a tour in Europe, and then they were playing in front of like a crowd of 200 people in small clubs. And he was like, either I give up now, we're done, or I give it one last shot. And the first thing he says is, bring back the Flynn. So it's Sammy, the guitar player, because he had been touring with him. And I was like, I want to bring him back in the studio now, because he was not on any record before. And all of them, they turned things around, and then they came out with Violent Revolution. So a pretty cool story. And I know when we first talked about the discussion for this podcast, we said it was albums, but also lineup. And I think Sammy, their guitar player, has added a great touch to Creator, kind of a Maiden touch, I would say, in the way he plays the guitar, the solos.
For sure, it's melodic. It's melodic.
Harmony. Absolutely, But that's why it's an interesting story. He was like coming back from the tour and said, "Bring back the Flynn." That's the first page of the book.
I can't wait to hear a full album now with Frédéric Leclerc, or Frederick Leclerc, as people up here in Canada would say, who famously was the bass player for Dragon Force and also Sinsanum. I don't know if you know that project, but he had this super death metal group with Joey Jordanson on drums and Attila from Mayhem, a singer. Like it.
I didn't know.
Yeah, really, really cool. Anyways, Andrei, I know that
Yes.
JP and I were big creator nerds. What does creator mean to you?
So I got into creator a little bit later on. I got into creator right around the time Enemy of God. So a very close friend of mine at the time, he's a huge thrash head. He's the kind of guy that I'm surprised doesn't have a Slayer carved into his arm. Just huge into that, and he's into all the German stuff. So he actually introduced me to the German side of thrash, because at the time I wasn't really into Slayer that much. Like, I enjoyed it, but it was like, okay, it's a little bit one-dimensional. And then we went to a Sodom show together, which I was like, this is getting a little bit interesting. And then for the first time I heard Enemy of God, and it was just, that title track from the very first riff was just unbelievable. And to this day, I still prefer Creator over Slayer, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Can't believe I said that on record, but
No, it's
interestingly enough, second exposure was Hordes of Chaos, which I did enjoy. You learn to appreciate it as you kind of listen to it a few times, so I do recommend that you guys do so. Just strip away any kind of expectations of it being a creator album, as just a standalone thrash album that pretend you just discovered it by a local band. It's actually pretty good.
It's not.
It has a couple of really cheesy tracks.
The problem with Hordes of Chaos is just that it just pales in comparison to what came before and right after, right? That's the problem.
and the opening track is so mind-blowing that then after the rest of the album is you're
Again,
expecting that same
100%.
energy.
Plus, everyone against everyone, chaos. So good. Actually, so my pick stands with Gods of Violence. I know that we didn't really talk too much about that album, but just check that album out. There's so much. Hail to the Hordes is so cheesy, but it's so amazing. Victory Will Come. Is that Phantom Antichrist?
No, that's Phantom. Yeah,
there you go. But
the Lion with
Eagle Wings. So good. I mean, Satan is Real is super cheesy, but it's a good song. Last thing I'll say about Enemy of God, though, and this is silly because sometimes like it's the tiny details that can make like the difference between an album that is good and an album that you just love for that one little thing. So my thing with Enemy of God, what I absolutely love is how they flow the song Enemy of God into Impossible Brutality. Like they kind of slow things down and the drums just start playing. There's no actual pause between these two songs.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
For me, they should always play these two songs, one after the other. Andrei, what was a disappointment for you?
My biggest disappointment. See, it's not fair because we already kind of touched on Saint Anger a little bit, so I'm gonna gloss over it. And I'll be honest, Death Magnetic was my number 4 pick, so I'm gonna go with Chinese Democracy.
Okay.
Like, not really a metal album, but I think all metalheads except JP can really appreciate Guns N' Roses for what they did for the genre.
100%.
And the expectation for an album that's been in the making for so many years, and just the history of the band and everything that they've accomplished, and Axl being at the helm and hearing him do what he does best in the studio, and thankfully not live because I can't do that to myself again. Was an incredible disappointment to me. I remember hearing the first 2 tracks, the preview tracks, which were IRS and Chinese Democracy title tracks, and I was actually quite intrigued because IRS sounded fantastic to me.
Yeah, the title track is pretty decent.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really fun. It reminds me a little bit of like the Illusion era, but then everything else was just. It seemed like it was a B-side of, if they made a Use Your Illusion 3, it would probably be on that album.
Right.
The lack of Slash was a really big highlight. You can tell that kind of bluesy, I mean, Bumblefoot does his best, but that really melodic, strong, like bluesy sound is completely gone. And coming from a really big Buckethead fan, I mean, I haven't heard his 3,000 or whatever albums that he's done, but everything I've heard from him and seen live has been amazing. And I'll be honest with you, I can't even understand what he played and what he didn't play on that entire album. It kind of blends in. The production really set me off. The vocals were fun, the layering, the mixing was good, but just everything, it wasn't a Guns N' Roses album. And it was just, the excess of ballads were just complete deal breaker for me.
Well, it's and so here's the thing. It is also part of my 3 biggest disappointments. So I had it on my list as well. And
a lot of
it's I wanted to love this album when it was about to come out. I wanted to like it. I was defending it to other people at the time. At the end of the day, it's not an album. That's it. As simple as that. Like there's at least 2 drummers on this album, and like there's 2 drummers. There's a million guitar players. I believe there's multiple bass players as well. And if you have, like, it is basically more of an anthology of different songs Axl created over time. And I mean, JP is a drummer, so I hope that he will agree with me, but you know, at the end of the day, the rhythm section of a band, aka the bass and the drum, they kind of set the tone for an album. They set a vibe, and if every song is basically a different group of musicians and recorded over so many times and re-edited and reworked, and it just, to your point, it doesn't feel like an album. It feels like a collection of songs. Some of them were pretty okay. For me, it was the biggest. Again, it's still a fun rock album. It's more like a compilation album, like I said. There's worse albums than Chinese Democracy, but it's probably the most expensive album of all time. It took the longest to make, and the disappointment here for me was just the biggest thing. Like I was so ready for Guns N' Roses to kind of show everybody, like, you know, screw you all. I can still do, and I say I because Guns N' Roses is Axl at this time. It's great to see that they've had some reunion tours with Duff and Slash and whatever, but at the time that Chinese Democracy came out, it really was just Axl and friends. And like I said, I had such high hopes and it just didn't deliver.
I do have to say one thing about that album, and the ones like, aside from IRS, which I thought was a cute song, one song that surprised me off that album was Madagascar. And they, other than the excessive kind of pre-recorded cuts from Apocalypse Now, whatever that movie's called, I thought that was an absolutely fantastic song. And just from lyrics to performance to the layering, the choirs, that is a really solid rock ballad. But you are right, it was an album that's been built up so much over the years that just fell completely flat in a sea of mediocrity, and I'm still a little bit traumatized by it.
All right, so let's
I can't say anything about it.
Yeah, I know you've been so good. It's clear that you're like, I'm not going there. JP, take our frustrations away. Why don't you share an album that for you really, really was amazing from a comeback album, or from a comeback band, sorry.
Yeah, so I was debating between going into doom metal or thrash metal, but I know we're all fans of thrash metal, so thought it'd be more interesting for the conversation to pick a thrash metal album.
We know that you love Cathedral. Just get it out there.
That would have been they're on my list for disappointment.
Okay.
But I have also another doom metal band for a great comeback album. But anyway, I'm gonna go to thrash metal. Also, the other reason is because you introduced me to the album Jasper. It's The Art of Dying by Death Angel.
Oh yeah.
If you go back to 1987, the Ultra Violence, fun album, great album. You can talk about production. You can talk about a couple of weak songs. Anyway. Great album, 1980s.
Before you talk too much about The Art of Dying, don't forget that the average age of the members of Death Angel at that time was 14 or 15 years old. Right?
Yeah.
Like they were kids, but continue.
Yeah, so anyway, The Art of Dying is a great album. It's so
Amazing.
much fun.
It's
Production
so
is
good.
great.
So good.
The songs
I'm so
are
glad you picked that album.
Yeah,
fun.
JP, seriously, you've just been copying my list so far.
I think it's a great album. It's
great.
I don't have much to say about it. If anybody's listening to this podcast, I'd say, go onto Spotify,
Stop listening
YouTube,
to this podcast and listen to that
and
album.
go, The Art of Dying. If you want a fun, solid, thrash album with great productions, that's it. Just go to this album. 2004, it's a revival of thrash metal, the comeback of thrash metal.
For me, so here's the thing. For me, this is sorry. I'm gonna take one step back. You guys may notice, may not. There are two famous Chucks in metal. Yeah, Chuck Schuldiner and Chuck Billy, right? Chuck Billy from Testament, singer. Chuck Schuldiner, the guitar player and singer of Death, who unfortunately passed away from cancer. They were both, when he was still alive, they were both going through cancer in the late 90s, early 2000s. And specifically for Chuck Billy, who was having a tumor that he had to remove, some friends of him put on a festival to raise money because they're in the United States and they don't have, healthcare. Anyway. But and so they put on this show called Thrash of the Titans. I don't know if you know about this one festival, and it's a one-time festival that happened.
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly, and it was in 2001 or 2, and for this show, it was in San Francisco, the Bay Area, where all these great thrash bands from the early 80s came from, and they had all disappeared. Most of them had disappered, right? Testament was still around, but that was basically it. And for this one show, all these other bands reunited. Now, eventually, they included some other bands. So Anthrax was there as well, who's from the East Coast, not a West Coast band at all. But the lineup of that show, and keep in mind that all these bands didn't exist until that festival. Death Angel, Violence, Heathen, Forbidden Evil, I think as well, or Forbidden as they're called. Like all these bands reunited, and all of them in this revival of thrash released career highlight albums, in my personal opinion. And for me, the first one to do so and really kickstart the whole thing was Death Angel with The Art of Dying. When I first heard that song, when the acoustic guitar intro and then just thrown to the wolves. Oh man, it's so good. Sorry, JP and Andrei, I cut you off again.
No, you did not.
I'm the worst, but
I was done.
Such a good album. If Death Angel is one of those bands, and again, they're still, they never made it to the main stage, if you will, and still not today, even though they have lots of great albums that came out after The Art of Dying. Similar to Creator, they've got solid stuff. They never became as big as a Slayer, a Megadeth, an Anthrax, or a Metallica, or even an Exodus or a Testament. But it's one of those bands that if I can see them, if they're touring and they're somewhat in my area, I will go see them. Great band.
I saw them. I think they played Heavy TO in 2011. Not a headliner by any means, but it was fun. I've never heard of them before that, and that's the show where I actually really got into these guys. I don't think they did a lot of touring before that. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, they played. I saw the Art of Dying tour. They played in Europe. They played Grasp Up a few times. But to your point, they were always afternoon in the marquee, and they still are. They will still open today for a Testament, but I love this band so much. Rob Cavestani, who is basically the which I would say is the mastermind of this band, is a great guitar player. So much energy. They're also, which is fun. You can clearly see now, if you put them next to Exodus, if you put them next to Testament, you see that they are a little bit younger than those guys, even though they were around the same time. But they were, like I said earlier, they were teenagers when they got started. Filipinos from, it's a cool story. One day Netflix should make a movie about Death Angel.
But anyway, great album. I love it.
Yeah. I
Awesome.
preferred the Evil Divide, but that album definitely was a complete resurgence. So it was also on my list, JP. So we're 2 for 2.
Awesome.
Funny story is I was hanging out at Jasper's place when a few months after we met for the first time, and then you had your essential metal, your metal essential compilations, and there was a revival of thrash metal, and I grabbed it and put it in the car, and
I
there was the song that Death Angel was the front of the walls with the song that was playing. So that through you, I discovered that album and then been hooked to it since. So thank you.
My pleasure.
So you had a cheat sheet for this podcast.
That was years ago. That was a while back.
All right, I'll throw in one for which I think is a absolutely terrible album. Like, this is not just bad because it's not living up to the expectations, but it's an album that I wanted to like. There was a lot of disappointment, but I can just not play it anymore. This is a band that I love, even though, they do not age well. I'm talking about The Lord of Steel by Manowar. So it's the album that came out, I think it's 2012. Manowar, obvious. No. 2009 was their EP, Gods of Thunder in the Sky. It's definitely, 2011, 2012, something like that.
Yes, right, you're right.
So with Manowar,
It's horrible.
I love Manowar. It's one of those guilty pleasures. I think Eric Adams is one of the best singers in metal, especially when he was in his heyday. There's so much wrong with this band. There's so much wrong. Well, yeah, and they kind of realized that themselves, because when they re-recorded Kings of Metal, they excluded Pleasure Slave, by the way.
That wouldn't.
Yeah, like Manowar is not a band that necessarily the world needs in 2021, but maybe it does. Like it's just so over the top, and I love this band. I've seen them live. I know that they've struggled in recent years with putting on good shows, but I saw them luckily before that whole thing started to come down. So I saw them, and it was a phenomenal show. It was everything that I wanted. I can get pumped up by so many Manowar songs. Andrei and I went to see Ross the Boss play live just before the pandemic hit.
It was our last show.
It was our last show, and I love the show. And like I'm not gonna lie, I'm not ashamed of it. I love Manowar. I love Manowar, even if it's sometimes really, really bad. But it's so bad that it's so amazing.
Cheers to that.
Exactly. But so
Cheers to admitting that.
Yeah. I love Manowar. I think that if you look at this in the new century, Warriors of the World United, that album, I think, or Warriors of the World, the album, I think United is the name of the song. Warriors of the World, I think, is a great album. I think Gods of War, that came out in 2000, I think, because 2005 was the day the Earth shook, the Absolute Power live album, live DVD, which was phenomenal. The Gods of War album in 2007, love that album. I've played that album so many times. Thunder in the Sky EP was great, and I was like, this band is on a roll, this band is back. And then the whole thing fell apart. Obviously, they've lost some members. As Scott Columbus passed away, he had already left the band, I think. And then Manowar started to become. They were already a parody in some way, but they became a parody of themselves after 2010, and they started re-recording their classic albums with ridiculous production. And then The Lord of Steel came out, which is still the last album. They've released a few EPs since then. They've ended. They did the farewell tour, and then they said no, the farewell tour was just the tour, and we're coming back. And The Lord of Steel is so bad, and I wanted to love it. I bought it the day it came out in the special edition, and oh man, I was disappointed. I'm sorry that I'm going on a rant here, because I'd love to interview Manowar at one point. I'd love to go back to a show when they get to play again. But
I would love for you to interview Manowar.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. They're still one of the coolest bands around, man. Like if you put in if you think, like, especially people that are outside of metal, like as stereotypical as metal can be, multiply that by 1,000 and you get the Manowar, and it's great. Like, play, Hail and Kill right now, and I get enough energy to go outside in the snow and take on anything in the world, right? But it's so good, and the connection and the fans are all like, play at any metal festival at the after party, one Manowar song, the entire crowd, exactly, the entire crowd comes together. It's a great metal band. And then this album was just, it was such a disappointment, and I was so surprised. I was shocked because the Thunder in the Sky EP that came out a few years before, I love that EP. I think it's a phenomenal EP. And then I don't know what happened, but it just completely fell apart.
You got me inspired. I switched over to my leather vest now. I'm looking for my loincloth. Hail and Kill.
Please.
All right, guys. Well, what I have to say is, since we're talking Manowar, one more beer and heavy metal, and I'm just fine. Being, as you mentioned, in my late 30s, I will be going for a light beer. I'm not proud of it, but this is Side Launch, which is one of my favorite local craft brewers. It's an Any Day Light IPA, and it's actually really solid. If you like, it tastes more like a saison, but quite nice.
No, as I'm pouring another beer here for myself, which is a gorgeous, if you like dark beers, a gorgeous porter called The Art of Darkness by Radical Road in Toronto. We've covered 6 albums so far. We've done 3 positive ones, 3 negative ones. Just as a quick recap, the negative ones that we have, Metallica, Death Magnetic. Still don't agree with you there, JP, but I'll submit to the majority. Guns N' Roses, Chinese Democracy, and then Manowar, Lord of Steel. On the positive side, we've had Creator with Gods of Violence. We had Iron Maiden with Brave New World, and Death Angel with The Art of Dying. We've talked a lot. I'm sure people are getting bored by now. Why don't we do a couple of speed rounds? So we're not going to go too much in conversation. But Andrei, give us a couple of bad ones and a couple of good ones, and we'll just react to them. But we're not going to really discuss them in depth. But give us some quick fire here.
I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna say 2 good ones and 2 bad ones. I'll give you that. So good ones. I think I'm surprised it hasn't made the list. Surgical Steel by Carcass.
Oh yeah,
which was a lot. Fun.
So
much fun. One of the original melodic death metal, and then just came back with a completely different experience. I love that. The other good one never lived up to the expectations of the band and what they've done, but I think 13 by Black Sabbath was actually a banger. Half the tracks on that album are really solid, and there's not a lot of really weak songs on it. Some of the bonus tracks, I can't remember them off the top of my head right now. Such with an N, I can't remember what it is, but it was such a rockin' riff. It was a lot of fun. So those are my 2.
Give us 3. Give us 3. Do you have more? Let's pump out a couple here.
Another.
By the way, I had 13 as one of my biggest disappointments. By the way.
Oh, it's funny. I had it with Andrei, same as you. I think it was half the album is great, so it was more than my runner-up for.
But here's the thing. Andrei, I think it is a good album. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, who needs it?
But when the bar is set that high.
Well, Ozzy left Black Sabbath in 1977, 78, or was kicked out is a better way of saying it, and I'm like. It's all great. I definitely saw, and JP's wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt right now. But I saw their The End tour, which was phenomenal. I'm glad that I was able to see that. But I was not I was not hoping they would play songs from 2000 whatever at that show. But anyway, we're not going to go into too much details.
Fair enough.
Fine here, but it's a good album. It's a good album. All right,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah,
What was the third one?
The third one, as tempting as it is to say, because that's just what people expect to say, is Tool's Fear Inoculum. But I don't like Tool, even though I admit they're a phenomenal band and that album is probably really good. I'm gonna go with Firepower by Judas Priest.
Oh yeah, that is a good
amazing
pick, man. That's a good pick. That is a good.
It took me a while to accept it because there was a lot of throwbacks from Retribution. Oh my God, what was the previous one?
The previous Redeemer of Souls. And to be honest, Redeemer of Souls on my list of disappointments. It was
bad.
Yeah.
It was really bad. But I heard a whole bunch of riffs and vocal lines that were from Redeemer of Souls, but they redid it and they recreated it. And it's once I got past the fact that there was some duplicates, it was a phenomenal album.
Yeah, I agree. If you like traditional heavy metal, it's one of the best albums of the decade. It's good. JP, same. Let's move on first. Let's do some disappointments, and we'll come back to then we'll go to positives. JP, give us 3 disappointments that you just want to shoot at us.
I don't know if I have 3, but I have 2 at least.
2 is fine.
I'd say Repentless by Slayer.
Interesting.
Fair.
Not, love Slayer up to early 90s, I would say. And then, Repentless for me was boring, repetitive. Except the opening track, nothing really stood out.
I have a question for you since you're talking about that. What did you think of Christ Illusion and World Painted Blood?
I think World Painted Blood was a little bit better.
I like that album.
Maybe more, different in the sound, better riffs, better production, less repetitive. I haven't listened to God Hates Us All in a while, so can't really talk about it. But I think World Painted Blood was more fun.
Mm-hmm. Christ Illusion? What about that?
No, terrible. I don't like
really?
it. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, we disagree there.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
Jasper, same question.
Sorry, what was the question? Oh, which are the Slayer albums in the new century?
I mean,
God Hates Us All. I love that album, but it's also sentimental. It's like it is 100% the first Slayer album I ever got on vinyl, and so I was just like getting started with vinyl. I think I was, because this is what God Hates Us All is, what, 2002, 2000 something.
2001, yeah.
Yeah. So I was 17 years old, so that was just like the prime time. I think World Painted Blood was a good album. I think it just had like we talked about this last time. Like my favorite Slayer, unlike yours, Andrei, I know, but my favorite Slayer is Slayer that puts the gas down, and goes fast and just doesn't take prisoners. And for me, World Painted Blood is like that. But anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, more fun, more Slayer-ish. Yeah.
More Slayer-ish.
Definitely.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. JP, you said Slayer. What other album? Sorry.
So I'll go back to Doom. Oh, I haven't actually talked about Doom, so I'll go to Doom. I know you mentioned Cathedral. I'm a huge fan of Cathedral in the 90s. Forest of Equilibrium is mind-blowing, and obviously they were able to change their sound to more Black Sabbath type album with the Carnival Bizarre. So love the band, love the fact that they were able to release like couple of solid albums in the 90s and have different sounds. But I would say like after that, whether it's The Last Fire, The Guessing Game in the 2001 2005 years are not that great. So if there's anybody who's listening to the podcast who's a fan of doom metal, I would not recommend any of the Cathedral albums from the 2000s. That's it.
All right. Okay, so I have a long list. I'm not gonna lie, of albums that I thought were disappointing. Before I tell you my three, one thing that I do want to call out, something that I said at the beginning of this podcast, we're gonna talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We talked before about Hardwired, and for me, that's an example of an ugly. It's like it's kind of good, but there's too much bad that it's kind of ugly, and it's this trend I find that's been around in the 2010s that people are releasing unnecessary double albums. So albums that in total are less than 80 minutes in total, but somehow they're put on 2 discs. And like an example of that is the Book of Souls by Iron Maiden. I'm like, why is that on like cut those, cut a few minutes intro and outro here and there, and you've got a 1 disc album. Hardwired is another example of that. But
I agree.
I call those fake double albums. And like there's this whole spiel when it gets released about like, oh wow, this band in like their 100th year of existence is still so passionate that they're making a double album. It's like, it's not a double album. You just spread 1 album over 2 albums, and maybe you added a few mediocre songs. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox here. The 3 albums for me that were disappointments. And I'm gonna preface that all 3 were albums that I have ardently defended in the past and that I wanted to like. Number 1, Morbid Angel with Illa Divinum Insanus, which was supposed to be their big comeback, and they went all deathcore, and it was like, what are you guys doing? You guys are like the staple of old school death metal. Luckily, they made some changes. Iced Earth, the Glorious Burden. Oh man. I mean, I did my preparation before January 6th. Some of you, so I'm not even gonna go there with that. Regardless of what has happened in American politics in the last few weeks, I'm all things said and done, mostly an Iced Earth fan. I do like a lot of what they do. I love their current their latest lineup. I think
do they have a lineup?
I'm not sure. I do believe they do, but with Stu Block, I think they have a phenomenal singer. I love that guy. I'm not gonna lie. I like a lot of what Tim Ripper Owens has done. I like that guy. I like that singer, but the Glorious Burden. And I had a poster. I will tell you. I had a poster of the Glorious Burden in my room for at least 10 years, because I'm a big nerd when it comes to history, and the Glorious Burden is obviously an album that is talking about famous, mostly battles in history, and there's a whole second album that deals with Gettysburg and Civil War. I'm a big nerd when it comes to the American Civil War, which is weird because I'm from Belgium. But anyway, that album, I wanted to like it. I liked it, or I told myself I liked it, but if you look at it, it's so terrible. It's really
Can
not
I jump
great.
in?
Go for it, please do.
Can I jump in? I do, for the most part, agree with you that the songwriting, mostly the vocal lines for that album, are atrocious. But come on, that trilogy in the end is so epic.
It's epic, but it's
so
also kind of boring. And if you look at that, and that is also the bonus album to that. So like, if your bonus tracks are what's best about your album, you have a problem. Like,
I didn't know those were bonus tracks.
It's like, they have a couple, like the Reckoning, I thought was a pretty decent song, but then you've got like When the Eagle Cries, or whatever it is. That whole ballad about like, we're the sleeping
9/11
of America is not asleep anymore, and we're gonna show the world. And then also like Green Face. It's like about the U.S. Special Forces, and there's literally the line in the chorus is like, I keep ears for trophies, and it's like, dude, like, what are you even doing? Like, it's so terrible. But anyway. That was my second pick, and my third pick for biggest disappointment. And I'm gonna brace myself, because I don't know if you guys will agree with me or if you guys will hate me for this, but I have to say, The Final Frontier by Iron Maiden.
I agree.
I'm a big Maiden fan, as you guys know. I'm a big Maiden fan, and I like some songs on that album. I like The Alchemist on that album. I like Coming Home to some extent. I like to some extent The Final Frontier and what's it, El Dorado. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But
Wild Wind
oh
Blows,
man,
yeah.
it was also so hyped, and it was so politically correct to say that was the best Iron Maiden album ever, and I was just like, no, it's not. It's just
It's
not.
terrible album.
That
I
was
agree.
okay. It was okay.
I think it's really bad.
Come on.
You know, yeah.
Even
Anyways.
if you listen to it, the production is not that good compared to the other albums.
honestly,
track list is bad. Yeah.
Has Kevin Shirley ever, lived up to Brave New World ever again with any band? Like, he's a great producer, and what he did with Inglorious, that kind of like Led Zeppelin-y kind of rock band is pretty cool. But Brave New World is always going to be his masterpiece. And yeah, all the Joe Bonamassa stuff is pretty cool too. But anyway,
I'm totally listening to Brave New World after this.
oh yeah, it's such a phenomenal album. Like, anyways,
Right after this, I'm plugging right.
so those were, a bit of a rapid fire.
Can I bring one? I only had one on my list that the rest I don't think any of you guys care about, like Saints of Los Angeles or bullshit like that.
I have Saints of Los Angeles on my list as well. But for those of you who don't know that album, that's okay. That's totally okay. It's one of the comeback albums of Motley Crue, and there's one good song on that album. But anyway, sorry, Andrei, go ahead.
Two good songs. I can't remember what. There's the title track, and then there was another one that I liked. I can't remember which one it was, which says a lot about the album. What do you guys think? And I always forget the name of this one. I always mispronounce it. The Devil You Know.
Oh,
By Heaven and Hell.
I kind of liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I like it more than 13.
I could not get into that album one bit. I've tried so many times. I cannot get through the entire album in one listen. It's just, it feels like a neutered Dio, and just, I don't know. That was on my list actually for, that was number 3 on my list for most disappointing, with Saint Anger being the top list.
Okay, interesting.
What do you think, JP? Deal tiebreaker?
He's JP is figuring out the unmute button, and while he does that, Andrei, I'm going to tell you something. Except for one album, there hasn't been an album after 2000 that Dio sang on that I genuinely love. I love Dio as a singer. I think Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath and I think Holy Diver by Dio are two of the absolute best metal albums ever created. The one album that I very much like that he sings is his album Magica of 2000 or 2001. I forget.
2000. Yeah, 2000. And I actually quite enjoy Killing the Dragon.
Yeah, Killing the Dragon. I think there's a couple of good songs in there, but like as a whole. But The Devil, I kind of liked it, and for me, it made more sense than 13. But anyway, I'm gonna shut up, and I'm gonna.
I agree with you.
JP say what he wants to say.
All right, JP,
Yes.
lay on the Dio knowledge.
No, I'm not a great fan of it. Never did anything to me. Look, Heaven and Hell, I agreed. For me, it's gonna sound weird, but I think it's the best Black Sabbath album. Like,
it's so good.
Best album.
We'll agree to disagree.
Look, Sabbath in the 70s was amazing, but Heaven and Hell can beat it. The thing for me with Dio too is like I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and a lot of people say, "Oh, he's the GOAT, he's the greatest singer ever." Like live, for me, doesn't do it for me. I still have to see a video of Dio when he's super sharp live, which I haven't seen. So
his rainbow stuff. Oh,
but
is
still,
rainbow stuff,
watch
JP, I would encourage you to check out the live recording of Dio at Donington in 1987. He did Donington 83 and 87.
Okay.
That's pretty good. But sorry, continue.
No. Just gonna say, even if I love Rainbow, but still, he's gonna sing different. The singing is gonna be different compared to the album. It's gonna
100%.
find ways to follow the melody in a way, do the harmony lower and things like that, then he's not like Bruce Dickinson. Yeah, it's anyway.
Yeah.
Not a fan. So
here I'm gonna say something, and I did make I do have a video on the channel where I explain the history of Black Sabbath in 5 minutes, which, by the way, is I had to speak pretty fast to get it into 5 minutes. But anyway.
It was a hilarious video. I loved it. It was a good one, especially the 80s.
Yeah. The 80s of Black Sabbath is the craziest. But anyway, I said in that video, and I stand by it, I think that most people agree that Dio era Black Sabbath is better quality, but you can't really have Black Sabbath without Ozzy. And for me, Heaven and Hell is one of the best metal albums of all time, but I'm struggling to say it's the best Black Sabbath album of all time. I think it's better than Paranoid, which is a phenomenal album. I think it's better than Black Sabbath, the original album, but I think that Paranoid is a better Black Sabbath album than Heaven and Hell. Like in a weird way.
I think it's a sign of the times. Like you can't, as the genre kind of evolves prior to Heaven and Hell, just if you look at the sample size, like everything that Sabbath did was untouchable. And I remember we were sharing, there was a link that went out that said best albums by year from 1970 onward, and it's just the 70s are completely dominated by Black Sabbath, and
100%.
you can't deny it, because at that time the genre just didn't evolve. I would be really curious to hear what Dio era Sabbath would sound like with Ozzy at the helm, because that would be very different and very cool.
Yeah.
Like they could slow it down, and it would be really eerie and weird.
It would be cool. It would be cool for sure, but I don't know. Like, I feel like Heaven and Hell for me, the album Heaven and Hell, not the band, but Heaven and Hell, the album, for me, that is the moment that metal went from this weird thing to this massive thing. Like, Heaven and Hell, after that comes Iron Maiden, comes all the hair metal fucking bands, comes whatever. But anyway, we could talk 2 hours about Heaven and Hell, and let's not, our 25 listeners, let's not make them go through that right now just yet, because we've been talking for over an hour now. Andrei, back to you. Let's talk about, give us a rapid fire. 2, maybe 3 albums that you think were just phenomenal. Not maybe your top picks, because we talked about those already, but some albums that you really liked that you want to highlight.
I'm fresh out because there was so much overlap. My top 4 were A Brave New World, Surgical Steel, Art of Dying, and 13, with Firepower and Fear Inoculum being honorable mentions.
All right.
I'm
cool.
Fresh out of ammo, guys.
No worries. JP, over to you then.
Yeah, I mentioned Doom before. I'm gonna mention Doom again, because it seems like I'm the only Doom metal fan.
That's bullshit. You know how much I love Doom metal.
I know, it's true. And you're even better at Funeral Doom, which I'm not. I'm more traditional Doom.
That's true. I do like my Funeral Doom.
Yeah, it's true. I'd say anyone who loves Doom, I'd say check out the Paradise Lost in the year 2010. I'd say Medusa was a great album. Look, in the 90s, Draconian Times was a phenomenal album. I think it was 95. Great Doom album. And then after that, the band, drifted away from the traditional Doom sound. It was more like proggy, lots
Gothic
of keyboard, Gothic rock. A bunch of different things.
Keyboard.
Yeah, keyboards. Awful.
Well, yeah, but continue.
No, I was just gonna say, for me, it was Medusa, the 2017 album. It's so good. It's a great album, great Doom album. They went back really to the traditional heavy, slow sound, heavy guitars, traditional Doom riffs is great. So I really recommend it.
No, I mean, I would say that before Medusa, The Plague Within was a good album too, and that I think was the first time that they really they went back to the death doom that they pioneered in the late '80s, early '90s with the album Gothic, right? Cool.
Oh, keyboards.
Does it make up for the keyboards?
Yeah.
So, for quick reminder for the listeners who are listening to this podcast for the first time, you are talking to Jasper, myself, who the only instrument he can play is the recorder. JP, who is a drummer extraordinaire for an Iron Maiden cover band, and Andrei, who is the keyboard player of a prog metal band from Toronto called Driftglass. So, whenever keyboards are mentioned, let's say that 1/3 of this group likes that and 2/3 starts laughing.
Oh, I fucking hate it. I don't know who likes that.
All right. So thank you, JP, for sharing. I think those are great picks. I'm gonna add a few more, and like I said, I have a long list, but I'm gonna just leave it to 3. We can talk later. Number 1 comeback, and this is kind of unfair maybe because it's a new band, but it is really a comeback, and this is the comeback of the Cavalera brothers with Cavalera Conspiracy Inflicted, which blew me the fuck away. That album was just so good. So the album is called Inflicted, the first one. They actually wanted to call their band Inflicted, if I remember correctly, but for some reason, I'm sure that the label said like, no, we're gonna call
the label thing
Cavalera something because we need people to know that it's Max and Igor Cavalera from Sepultura. Check it out if you like early '90s Sepultura, like Arise and Chaos AD, when they were transitioning from thrash to groove metal. Cavalera Conspiracy is for you. Like that, it's just so good. That's number 1. Number 2,
agree.
that
Great
I would
album.
call out as a great comeback. I can't believe we didn't mention them before because they've had 2 massive. Well, they had more comebacks in their career, but 2 massive comebacks, and twice those albums have the word black in them. It's Acdc with Black Ice. When they came back with Rock and Roll Train and Big Jag, all of a sudden Acdc was back and they were the biggest band from out of nowhere. I think JP, you and I saw that tour. No, we didn't see that tour. We saw another tour, but because they released.
Yeah, I saw it, but we saw it separately, I guess.
Yeah.
Saw it a few times,
Rock and Roll Train by itself is one of the best Acdc songs with Brian Johnson, I think. Big comeback album. Obviously, the other album I was talking about was Back in Black, which is maybe the biggest comeback of all time. One of the best-selling albums of all time, but we were talking about 21st century comebacks. And then my third, and this is one that I had in my top 3, The Blackening by Machine Head, with Halo, with Aesthetics of Hate. This was the album that made Machine Head from like a mid-level good band to metal royalty into my like 2007, I believe it came out, the album 2008 maybe. The Blackening was the album that year everybody agreed it was the album of the year.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't say Enter the Locust because that was kind of like their back to form.
Yeah, but that was the next album, right? The Blackening is and on that album, obviously the song Halo.
That,
No. Unto the Locust is 2010. The Blackening is 2007. 100%.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that the Blackening follows Through the Ashes of Empires, but I could be wrong. But anyway, Halo, that song alone is just, it redefined groove and thrash metal for me. It's a phenomenal song. So The Blackening of Machine Head for me is up there.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it's when I first discovered Machine Head was through their kind of new metal rap rock phase.
Supercharger.
I don't even know. I heard them on a compilation CD that I bought in the late 90s, and I was like, yeah, okay. And then it wasn't until maybe like 2011, 2012 when I actually connected with somebody who's a big fan. It was like, oh no, dude, they're not a rap rock band. You should check this out.
Oh yeah. I mean,
mind blown.
Like the Blackening was just the album that, you know, put Machine Head back on the map, and all of a sudden they were one of the biggest bands in metal. And to your point, Andrei,
right.
followed by Unto the Locust, which was a phenomenal album too.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny I didn't think about it because I didn't think it would be comeback.
Hey, they've been around since 1990, man.
I know. I just didn't think of. I thought more of the consistency. I forgot about Supercharger. I'd say I blanked it out maybe purposely. I said no, that era didn't exist. It's like no.
Memory, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Blank it out. So yeah.
And let's not forget Rob Flynn. His first big band was a Bay Area thrash band called Violence, right?
And then Through the Ash, if you pick one at the Through the Ashes of Empire, I think I picked that album over the Blackening, but yeah, it's another big difference. But yeah, completely forgot.
All right, well, I'm running low on beer again. I see that Andrei just finished his beer, so maybe this is a good time to wrap up our recording. So, JP, Andrei, thank you so much for your.
Thanks for organizing.
I'm just gonna, recap what we said. We said that disappointments, and again, knowing that there's a ton of bands that made albums that were way worse. Death Magnetic by Metallica. Manowar, Lord of Steel, Guns N' Roses, Chinese Democracy were our biggest choices. But when we look at the best albums of comeback bands, we unanimously agreed on Brave New World from Iron Maiden. We unanimously agreed on Creator, although we all have our favorite picks there. And then we also had
Death Angel,
The Art of Dying. Thank you so much, Andrei. Yeah, a phenomenal album. Cool. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We do this once a month. We will announce via the Belgian Jasper YouTube channel and Instagram page what the next topic will be, and you can submit your suggestions and questions there as well. And check out the channel for more videos with bonus material of these conversations. Thank you all for watching, and we will talk to you next month. Thank you, JP. Thank you, Andrei.
Thanks, Jasper, for organizing.
Thanks for having us, man.
Guys.